It's 9 a.m. Taipei time. The markets are just opening up. Traffic on Keeling Road is, well, a complete deadlock like usual. And the humidity is already climbing.
Feels like any other Tuesday.
Exactly. And then the president of Taiwan walks up to a podium, looks right into the camera, and says 8 words that just shatter 50 years of geopolitical stability. We are now formally the Republic of Taiwan.
That is the scenario. It's the one that keeps every think tank, every admiral, and every single intelligence analyst up at night.
And here's the thing that really stood out to me from the sources we're looking at today. Immediately after those words are spoken, the sky doesn't fall, there are no air raid sirens, no missiles hit the presidential office building.
No paratroopers landing in Ximenending.
Nothing. Physically, the island is the exact same as it was 5 minutes before.
But strategically, the entire world has changed. And that silence, it's almost more terrifying than immediate noise. It represents a rupture.
A rupture.
Yeah, Beijing's entire worldview is built on the idea that this sentence is literally impossible. So when it's spoken, it's not just a provocation, it's a reality-breaking event.
And that's exactly what we're unpacking in this deep dive. We've got a whole stack of analysis here that looks at this day-after scenario. But we're not talking about the kinetic war, not yet.
Not the explosions and the dogfights.
We're looking at the strategic reaction. The mission today is to answer a really specific question. What actually happens inside Beijing's decision-making apparatus in those first 24 hours?
And this is where, the popular imagination totally gets it wrong. We think of these moments as emotional outbursts, the angry dictator slamming the desk, hitting the big red button.
Right, the movie version.
But the sources paint a picture of something much, much colder. It's a study in calculation. It's not chaos. It's a rigorous, almost algorithmic logic that just kicks into gear.
Okay, so let's set the stage. The declaration is out. The red line, the absolute ultimate red line, has been crossed. Why is this specific moment so different from the usual tension? I mean, we see headlines about cross-strait tensions, every other week? Why does this one trigger the algorithm?
Well, it comes down to the difference between, let's call it strategy and reality. For decades, Beijing has operated under the One China principle.
Which claims Taiwan is already part of China.
Exactly. Now, they know, practically, they don't control the island. But they can tolerate the ambiguity of the status quo. They can live with a Taiwan that acts independent so long as it never calls itself independent.
It's a diplomatic fiction.
That's it. Everyone pretends, and the pretending keeps the peace. A formal declaration just removes all the ambiguity. It forces the issue. And for the Chinese Communist Party, this is not just about territory.
Okay.
The sources are crystal clear on this. If Taiwan declares independence and makes it stick, Beijing loses legitimacy.
I really want to drill down on that word, legitimacy, because in, a Western context, we think of legitimacy as winning an election. But for the CCP, it's something much more existential, isn't it? It's not just votes. It's like the mandate of heaven, but the modern version.
That's a perfect way to frame it. Think of legitimacy as a currency. The party spends this currency to buy stability and obedience from its people.
Okay.
One of the biggest bills in that currency is the promise of national rejuvenation. The idea that the party, and only the party, can restore China to its rightful place after the century of humiliation.
And restoring the borders is, central to that idea. You can't be a rejuvenated great power if you can't even hold on to your own claimed territory.
Precisely. If they lose Taiwan permanently, formally, that promise is broken. The currency collapses. And the sources point to 3 specific pillars that just crumble. First, the domestic one.
Right.
If the leadership looks weak on Taiwan, they look weak everywhere. And in an authoritarian system, perceived weakness is blood in the water. It invites challenges from inside the party, from the public.
And then there's the international pillar. If China can't enforce its will on an island 100 miles off its coast, its whole claim to be a superpower on par with the U.S. looks shaky.
And finally, the historical pillar. No leader in Beijing wants to be remembered as the one who lost Taiwan. That's a mark of shame that lasts for centuries in Chinese history. So what here is that the reaction isn't really about land, it's about regime survival.
They have to act.
They must. Not because they necessarily want a war, but because the alternative is potentially the collapse of the party's authority.
So that sets the stakes. It's an existential crisis from minute 1. Okay, let's look at the timeline. The president speaks at 9:00 a.m. What is happening in Beijing at 10 a.m. hour 1?
This is the first reality check. The movies show generals scrambling to missile silos.
Yeah.
The sources say Hour 1 is an emergency Politburo standing committee meeting. It's just 7 men in a room.
It sounds kind of bureaucratic, but I have to imagine the tension in that room is just suffocating. This isn't a debate about whether to respond, is it?
No, absolutely not. The decision to respond is structural. It's already been made by that legitimacy crisis we just talked about.
Yeah.
This meeting is about how.
Okay.
They're weighing two terrifying risks. On one hand, if they do nothing or too little, they look weak and the regime wobbles. On the other, force is incredibly expensive.
Right. War destroys economies, and China's economy is the other main leg of that legitimacy stool. If they tank their own economy to take Taiwan, they might destabilize the regime anyway.
That's the core dilemma. So they're calculating the minimum amount of force they need to achieve a political goal, which is the reversal of the declaration.
Yeah.
They don't want to occupy Taipei in Hour 1. They want Taipei to take the words back.
Okay, so let's move forward. Hour 6. The meeting is over. Orders are going out. What does the rest of the world start to see?
By Hour 6, we enter the phase of lawfare and diplomatic shock and awe. This isn't just a few angry press releases. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the United Front Work Department, they go into absolute overdrive. You'll see a flood of statements declaring the move illegal, invalid, a violation of international law.
They're trying to shape the battlefield before a single soldier moves.
Yes. They're drawing a legal cordon around the island. They're demanding that every single country on Earth reaffirm their one China policy and do it now. It's a loyalty test. They want to isolate Taiwan diplomatically so that when the physical pressure starts, Taiwan feels totally alone.
And that physical pressure starts showing up around, what, Hour 12?
That's right. This is the shift to military signaling. And the details here really matter. It's not just moving some ships. The sources describe the activation of the rocket force, the PLARF.
But they're not firing.
Not firing, but they're moving mobile launchers out of their garrisons and into firing positions where American satellites can see them.
They want the satellites to see them. It's theater.
It is a threat display. You'll see cyber units start pinging Taiwan's infrastructure, not taking the grid down, maybe not yet, but flickering the lights.
Just a reminder.
A reminder that we're here and we can touch you. They'll probably announce live fire exclusion zones around the island's main ports.
But, and this is the key point, the sources keep hammering home, it is not an invasion. Not yet. We're 12 hours in and no one has crossed the beach.
Because invasion is the point of no return. Beijing wants to solve this without the massive gamble of a total war. They're looking for an off-ramp. They are trying to scare Taiwan into submission.
Which brings us to this idea of the decision tree. I love this concept. It really breaks down the options into a logical flow. Beijing basically has a menu of bad options, and they have to pick the least bad one. The sources outline 3 main pathways of escalation. Let's walk through them. Pathway 1 is symbolic retaliation.
This is the lowest rung on the ladder. It's all about economic pain. Sanctions on Taiwanese tech companies, freezing all cross-strait trade, banning travel. It's designed to hurt the wallet of the average Taiwanese citizen.
But in a moment of high nationalist fervor like declaring your independence, people are usually willing to take some economic pain, right? If I just declared my country free, I might not care that my export license got suspended.
And that is the fundamental flaw in Pathway 1. Emotional momentum often just overrides economic rationality. If the Taiwanese population is cheering in the streets, sanctions might just make them angrier, more resolve.
So if Pathway 1 fails, Beijing has to climb the ladder. Pathway 2. Coercive demonstration.
Now we're getting into kinetic territory, but it's still short of actual war.
Yeah.
This is the blockade-light scenario. Imagine missile flyovers, literally lobbing ballistic missiles over Taipei that land harmlessly in the Pacific.
Wow.
Or massive naval drills that effectively close the island's major ports for a few days.
That's psychological terror. It's about disrupting shipping insurance, spiking global shipping rates, and making the entire island feel like a prison.
Exactly. The goal is to create panic. They want the Taiwanese business elite and the general public to run to their government and scream, "Please, take it back, we can't live like this." They're trying to break the will of the population.
But let's play devil's advocate here. Let's say the Taiwanese government holds firm. They say, "We knew this was coming. We are not backing down." Then Beijing is really backed into a corner. They have to go to Pathway 3.
Pathway 3 is limited force, and this is where people start dying. We're talking precision strikes on key infrastructure, taking out a radar station, a military runway, maybe a single power plant.
This just seems incredibly risky to me. The second you drop a bomb, You lose control of what happens next. You break it, you buy it.
It's tremendously risky, but in their calculation, it is still better than a full-scale invasion. It's a punishment strike. It's designed to show that the cost of independence is real, physical destruction.
I want to pause here for a second because I'm noticing a pattern in all three of these pathways. Symbolic, coercive, limited force.
Yeah.
None of them are amphibious invasion. None of them are D-Day.
You've hit on the single most critical observation in this entire analysis. Invasion is conspicuously absent from the initial list of options.
But why? If they're so angry, if this is such a rupture, why not just go for the jugular?
Because invasion is irreversible. Once you put boots on the ground, you are in a total war. You are committed to regime change. There is no negotiation, no off-ramp.
You win or you lose, totally.
You either win totally or you lose totally. And an amphibious invasion of Taiwan is one of the most difficult military operations in human history. The risk of failure is very, very high.
And if they fail, the CCP falls. So they want to avoid that gamble at all costs. They want to stay in that zone where they can still negotiate a reversal.
Exactly. They want to keep their options open. But, and here's the giant variable that comes in and ruins all this nice, neat calculation.
There's someone else playing the game.
There is.
The United States. The
Yeah.
eagle in the room.
The U.S. is the variable that turns this from a regional sovereignty dispute into a potential World War III. The sources call this the pressure point. Beijing is watching Washington just as closely as it's watching Taipei.
Because if the U.S. recognizes the new Republic of Taiwan, the entire game changes.
It completely transforms the crisis. If the U.S. recognizes the declaration, it validates Taiwan's sovereignty. It signals to allies like Japan, South Korea, and Europe that they can follow suit. Suddenly, Beijing isn't putting down a rebellious province. They're attacking a sovereign nation recognized by the global superpower.
And there's this fascinating concept in the notes here called compression. The idea that U.S. involvement actually compresses the timeline.
This is absolutely crucial. If Washington stays silent or, ambiguous, Beijing has time. They can try the sanctions, they can try the blockade, they can spend weeks, maybe months, just turning the screws.
But if the U.S. president comes out an hour or two and says, we recognize the Republic of Taiwan and we will defend it,
then the timeline just collapses. Beijing feels that window slamming shut. They realize sanctions won't work because the U.S. will just backstop the Taiwanese economy. A blockade won't work because the U.S. Navy might just break it.
So ironically, by moving fast to support Taiwan, the U.S. might actually force Beijing to skip the lower rungs of the ladder and jump straight to the top.
That is the catch-22. Rapid U.S. recognition might convince Beijing that they have no time for coercive demonstrations. They might feel they have to seize the island now before U.S. forces can arrive in bulk. It forces that structural decision for war.
Which leads us to the pretty grim conclusion of this strategic analysis, the structural logic of force. We always ask, will China invade, as if it's a whim? But the sources suggest it's not really a choice, it's the outcome of a checklist.
It really is an algorithm. The experts argue that force becomes the least bad option, and you have to remember, all the options are bad here, only when a specific set of conditions are met. 1. Independence is declared. 2. There is no reversal from Taipei. 3. The U.S. signals recognition. And 4. Domestic pressure inside China builds to a point where it threatens the regime.
And if all those boxes are checked, the machine just takes over.
At that point, it doesn't really matter if the leader is a hawk or a dove. The structure of the power system itself demands action to preserve the regime. If they don't act, the regime collapses from the inside because of that loss of legitimacy. If they do act, they risk losing a war.
But they'll choose the risk of war over the certainty of internal collapse.
Every time.
That's a truly chilling thought. The idea that a war could start not because anyone wants it, but because the political machinery leaves them no other door to walk through.
And that ties directly into the final concept from our source material, peak fear.
Right, and this completely flips the script on how we think about aggression. We usually think countries attack when they feel strong. I'm powerful, I'm gonna go take what I want.
But history suggests the opposite is often true. Major wars frequently start not at peak strength, but at peak fear. It's when a rising power feels its window of opportunity is closing. They look at the trends. Taiwan's distinct identity growing stronger, U.S. alliances in the Indo-Pacific getting harder, their own looming demographic decline, and they panic.
They start to think, if we don't do this now, we can never do it.
That's it exactly.
Yeah.
And a Declaration of Independence acts as the trigger for that fear. It screams, the window is shut, you have lost. And that panic can override all the cold calculation. It makes a risky gamble look like a necessary survival tactic.
The sources also touched on gradual red lines, which I found really relevant for the world we actually live in. We started this deep dive with a very dramatic 9400 AM speech. But that's not usually how it happens, is it?
Rarely. Red lines are often crossed in a fog. Maybe it's not one single speech, maybe it's a series of small legislative changes in Taipei, or a gradual upgrade in U.S. diplomatic relations.
Salami slicing.
Exactly. You slice the salami so thin that no single slice is worth starting a war over. But eventually you look down and the whole sausage is gone. The danger is that Beijing might decide the line was actually crossed 6 months ago, and we didn't realize the clock had started ticking until the missiles were already fueling.
That brings us to the end of the analysis, but I want to leave you, the listener, with a final provocation. We've spent this whole time talking about cool, rational calculation, bureaucrats, in meetings, timelines, decision trees. But we live in a world where information travels instantly. If this declaration happens at 9:00 a.m., by 9:05 a.m., it is trending on every social media platform in the world. There are millions of reactions, videos, hot takes, and calls for action before the Politburo has even poured its first cup of tea. So my question is this: does the sheer speed of modern information destroy the decision tree? Can strategic patience even exist when the public in China, in Taiwan, and in the US is demanding immediate results? Does the viral nature of the event force that compression we talked about, effectively shortening a 24-hour timeline to a 2-hour timeline?
That is the uncalculated variable. No war plan survives contact with the enemy, and no diplomatic timeline survives contact with Twitter.
Something to keep in mind the next time you see a breaking news alert. That's it for this deep dive into the mechanics of a Taiwan crisis.
Thanks for listening.
Stay curious, and we'll catch you on the next one.